Hello everybody and welcome back to a new video on my channel. It is about halfway through the year now, which is crazy, and I've been doing a lot of reading this year. This has been one of my better reading years. I used to love to read so much whenever I was little, and I would read like hundreds of books every year. I don't read quite that many anymore, but I have read about 16 books so far this year, which I know is not a lot in a lot of people's terms, but it is a lot in my terms. So I'm going to be talking about all the books that I have read so far this year, and then I've also been seeing the like mid-year book tag, I don't know if it's book freakout or just like book tag going around, so I'm going to start by doing that and then I'm going to show you all of the books that I read at the end of this video. So let's just get started. So the first question is, what is the best book that you have read so far this year? And I have two books for this that I've given 5 stars to. These are the only two books that I've given 5 stars to so far. I had a couple that came quite close, but not quite there. So the first one is Caraval by Stephanie Garber, and you've probably heard of this book before. It's pretty popular on the internet right now, and especially like last year too. But I really liked this book. I thought it had some really cool and unique world building, and the kind of magic that was in this was quite different than a lot of books I feel like I've read recently. So I just really liked that unique aspect. This book is about a girl called Scarlett, and she and her sister live on this island with their dad, and Scarlett is supposed to be getting married. She has an arranged marriage, but she's always dreamed of seeing Caraval. Her grandma has always just told her about it, and it's like this carnival, circus, competition, game type thing, filled with magic, and if you win the competition then you get a wish. And so some things wind up happening and she winds up in this competition, and her sister is actually kidnapped by the person who runs the competition, and so she has to win this game in order to get her sister back. So there's a lot of magic, there's a lot of fun, lots of plot twists, and just unique ways of storytelling that I really enjoyed. So this was my first 5-star read and one of my best reads for this year. The next book that I also gave 5 stars to so far this year was Becoming by Michelle Obama, and this is her autobiography, and I actually listened to it. So I listened to the audiobook, which is actually narrated by Michelle Obama, which was really cool to listen to. It was really interesting just to hear about her life and her experiences, you know, like coming to the White House, being First Lady, all that kind of thing. But it was also just really cool to hear her thoughts on love and loss and growing up and privileges and being a woman in a space, a black woman especially, in a space where that's not the majority, and all of her thoughts and opinions on all of those kinds of things. And it was just, I really liked her way of writing. She just had a very beautiful way of depicting things and explaining things, and hearing her actually like use the words and tell her own story was just really, really cool. And I just felt very inspired after. I felt like she was very calm with everything, but she took a stance on a lot of things. I mean, she's a politician, like she's a lawyer, like she went through a lot of different things during her life, and just hearing her talk about it was really, really cool. And so if you are interested, I would recommend this book basically to anybody. It really does touch on some really deep things, and it's also funny and emotional. It made me laugh, it made me cry. I just really could not recommend this book more. The next question is, what's the best sequel that you've read so far this year? And I am going to go with The Queen of Nothing from the Folk of the Air trilogy. This is actually the 3rd book, which I think still counts as a sequel. I'm gonna feel really stupid if it doesn't count as a sequel, but we're gonna count it. So this is the last book, like I said, in the Folk of the Air trilogy, which is The Cruel Prince, The Wicked King, and The Queen of Nothing. And I've heard a lot of people talk about this series. It's really popular. I'm sure this is not your first time hearing about it, but I really liked this one in particular. I liked all the loose ends when they come together. I thought that the storyline in this one was my favorite. I just like the plot twists and things that happen the most. I can't go into too much detail, obviously, since it is a sequel, I don't want to ruin anything that happened in the previous books, but I would highly recommend this series if you haven't read it already. I tried reading it a couple of years ago. The first book, The Cruel Prince, I did read, and then I wasn't a hugest fan then, but I came back to it this year and read the whole series, and I like it a lot more. And I think that this book was my favorite. I've heard a lot of people say the second book is their favorite. I did like the second book more than the first book, but I like this one the most. The next prompt is, what is a new release that you haven't read yet but you want to read? And I have two for this. The first one is Emily Henry's Happy Place. I have just heard so many things about this. I love Emily Henry's writing. I have read, I think all of her other, I don't know if it's all of her other books, but like Beach Read, People We Meet on Vacation, Book Lovers, and I really enjoyed them all. And so yeah, I really want to read her newest book. Also, the cover is just so pretty and I want to own it, but I don't yet. So, and then the second book that I also want to read is another very hyped book, and that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I'm a sucker for anything with dragons in it. Honestly, dragon books are the reason I love reading in the first place. If anybody read Dragon Slippers and that little trilogy whenever you were a kid, then you will understand, but those books were my favorite things ever. The next prompt is, what is your most anticipated release for the second half of 2023? And I'm really excited about Immortal Longings by Chloe Gong. I read These Violent Delights, and it wasn't my favorite, but I think that's just because I took a really long time to read it, and whenever I take a long time to read books, I just don't like them very much. And that was just because I was busy and it was like the holidays and school and all of this stuff, so I just like didn't get through it very quickly. But it just sounds really interesting. It's about Antony and Cleopatra, I'm pretty sure, and it's like a retelling about them, and I am a sucker for good historical retelling, so I think that I'm really gonna like that book and I'm very excited for it to come out. Okay, the next question is biggest surprise, and I'm not sure if this meant like biggest plot twist or just what. I took it to mean like a book that maybe you weren't expecting to like as much as you did, or that really surprised you in the writing and the style and all of that. And I'm going to go with Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. I listened to this on an audiobook, which I think was a good choice for me because I don't think I would have read this otherwise. Does anybody else feel like that? Like there's some books I will read as an audiobook, but I'm like, if this was a physical book, I don't think I would get through it. But yeah, I was really surprised to like this book as much as I did, and I only gave it 3 stars at the time that I've read it, but looking back now, like I still think about this book quite a lot, so I feel like I would probably bump that up to like 4 stars. I just thought that the story was really unique and the writing was really unique and told in just such a clever way. And also this book made me cry, and when a book makes me cry, you know it's good, because I don't honestly tend to cry in books that often. One of the later questions is books you've cried in, so I'll be telling you more about that in a minute. But I just really think that the book had a unique premise. I liked the scientific approach to telling things, and I just thought the characters were just so intriguing and entertaining, and it was really just about like a woman who was going through a really hard thing in her life, but she kind of never really lost sight of herself, and she really just kept pushing herself and coming out on top, and she really did face some very bad things in her life, but she really loved what it was that she loved and like didn't lose sight of that and who she was, and I think that that's really special to read in a book. Okay, the next question is favorite new author, so a new author that has recently come out with a book or a new author to you. So for me, I'm going to go with Stephanie Garber because I did love Caraval so much. I really can't wait to read more of her books. Okay, the next question is newest fictional crush, and I definitely have to go with Cardan from The Cruel Prince and the Folk of the Air trilogy. I just love a good enemies to lovers, and his character development throughout the series was great, and I just like, oh, he's just so funny to me. I don't know if he was supposed to be written as funny, but like his sarcasm is scheming, but definitely Cardan. The next question is books that made you cry. I already said this for both of them, but Becoming by Michelle Obama and Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis, both of those made me cry. I do think that there is something about, both of these were audiobooks, and listening to a book versus reading a book for me are just very, very different experiences. So I'm not sure if I would have cried so much if I had been just reading the physical copies, but we'll never know. But I will say Becoming made me cry tears of joy as well, which was a new one for me. I really can't say I do that a lot. So the fact that it did that gets bonus points, I guess, because it made me cry when it was sad, but it also really did make me cry in moments when it was really happy. So that's amazing, because I really don't usually do that. The next question is a book that made you happy, and for that I'm going to go with Serenade by Tony Bentley, which I actually don't have with me right now, which is really annoying because it's a really pretty cover, but I'm in the middle of moving, so my stuff is just like all over the country right now. This book was just really special to me because it was about ballet, and I do ballet. I've done ballet like my whole life and I love it to pieces. So I love reading about it, and it was all about Balanchine, who is like a very big figure in the ballet world, and it's about Serenade, which is one of his ballets. It's absolutely gorgeous. Even if you're not a huge ballet fan, I would definitely recommend looking up Serenade. It's literally like a 30-minute ballet, and it's absolutely gorgeous. But I like this story because it went through like the history of ballet, about Balanchine, about art, about being a ballerina and what that means and the ins and outs of that. And I just, maybe it was because I could like relate to a lot of the things that it said. It also feels like kind of personal to me since it is a world that I am pretty ingrained with. Maybe not so much as a lot of people, like I never went pro or anything, but I know a lot of people who have, like those are the people that I did classes with growing up, so I still hear about it a lot, and it's just really special to hear those kinds of stories, and also just about the history of an art form that you're so, this is like so deeply ingrained in me. So I really liked this book, and it did just make me really happy. The next question is the most beautiful book that you've bought this year. I honestly have not bought that many books this year because I've been really dedicated to reading books that I already own, or I will like buy a book and then read it immediately. I would probably go with either Serenade, which makes me sad that I don't have it because it is just really pretty. It's just got like the picture of the like Serenade tutu on the front, and I like the pink and the blue. I don't know if you can tell in whatever picture I put on here, but like the actual hardback cover is pink, and I just like the combination. The other book I actually really like the cover of is The Marriage Portrait, which is another book that I've read this year, which I did actually quite enjoy. But I just think it's cool, like the like torn off writing, and usually I don't really like orange, but I really just like the way that this whole thing looks together. So probably one of those two. Okay, the final question in this tag is books that I want to read before the end of the year, and honestly, like, where do I begin? First of all, I have the Dark Artifices series. I read the first two, Lady Midnight and Lord of Shadows, like years and years ago, but I never got around to Queen of Air and Darkness, and so I want to reread these two before I read this one so that I know what's going on, because it actually drives me crazy whenever I can't remember what's going on in a book. And then in addition to that, I have a few others. Like I said, I want to finish reading the Caraval trilogy and hopefully read like Once Upon a Broken Heart, but I might wait and read that next year. We'll see how many books I'm reading at a time. Happy Place and Fourth Wing, those are very high up on my list right now of books I definitely want to read before the end of the year. And then I also really want to read The Priory of the Orange Tree. That was a really popular book like last year, I think, and it's a very thick book, but I love a good big chunky fantasy book, and I haven't read one really in a while, even though I guess technically like the Dark Artifices might satisfy that urge. But I have had my eye on this book for a while, but I wanted to wait till I graduated so I had time to actually sit and read it. Okay, so that was all for the tag, so now I'm going to move on to all of the books that I actually read this year and the order in which I read them and all of that kind of thing. So let's just get started. So the first book that I read was These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. I gave this 3 stars. It's Romeo and Juliet retelling in Shanghai, and I did really like this. It was just rather like slow paced for me, but that also may be because, like I said, I read this over a very long period of time and I kept having to like remember what was going on and I like couldn't. So I think it would be well deserved of more than 3 stars if I'd read this quicker. It just wasn't in the cards for me. The next book that I read was The Deal by Elle Kennedy, and I read this on my iPad, and this is just a romance. It was a very easy little read. I just needed like a palate cleanser, but this one actually touched on a lot more important themes than I was expecting it to. It wasn't just a very surface level romance, but it is a college hockey romance, and it was just really cute and I really liked it, and I read it in like 2 days, so that's how I know it was really, really good, and I gave it 4 stars. The next book I read was Caraval by Stephanie Garber, 5 stars. I've already talked about this enough in this video, but I would recommend this book. After that, I read Becoming by Michelle Obama. Again, I know I've talked about that a lot so far in this video, so I won't go too much into detail, except that it was 5 stars and I would definitely recommend. The next book that I read was The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell, and I gave this 4 stars. I actually did really like this book. It's about this girl, Lucrezia? I don't even know how to say it. It's set in Italy in like the 1550s, and it's about her life growing up in Florence, and then eventually she is married to the Grand Duke of, to the Ruta of Ferrara, and the Duke of Ferrara, and basically she's married to this man for only a year and then she dies, and that's like historical fact. It's based on an actual person, and so it's a fictional telling of her experience in that setting and kind of guessing at maybe what happened to her that caused her to die. So there's a lot of intrigue and just a lot of interesting points made historically and also just in general. Like, it was a good story and I really liked it. The next book that I read that I've also talked a lot about in this video was Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus, and I gave this book 3 stars, but looking back, I think I could give it 4 stars because it's a book I've thought about a lot. But this book is basically about this woman who is a scientist, where there's like obviously like very few female scientists because it's set in like the 50s, and it's about her story and how she falls in love and then gets pregnant and she becomes a single mother, and it's this whole situation that she has to deal with, and she's trying to work through and learn how to be a good mother and also just to be herself and continue to work in a field that's dominated by men, and it's just a really good story. I would definitely recommend it. Next, I read The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas. I read the Throne of Glass series last year and I really, really liked it, but I never got around to The Assassin's Blade, and I gave this book 3 stars. I don't know, it was like hard to go back to thinking about this version of the character like at the very beginning of the series after I've already read the whole series. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else. But it was just like kind of weird. I didn't love the stories in here. They were fine, but I felt like they were kind of subpar. Like, I'm never a big fan of novellas, so that's probably why. So take that with a grain of salt, what I'm saying, but it was still good. It did make me sad at times, but yeah, 3 stars for The Assassin's Blade. Next, I read my second non-fiction book of the year, which was one of my goals for this year, was to read more non-fiction books. So I read One Little Spark by Mati Sklar, and this is called Mickey's 10 Commandments and the Road to Imagineering. Mati Sklar was like a really important, big Imagineer who had a big impact on a lot of the Disney parks, and I love Disney and I love Imagineering, so I loved hearing about his stories and about what he thinks is the most important thing when it comes to working in Imagineering. But a lot of these things in general I think will transfer over to any job. He talked a lot about teamwork and about creativity and learning and growth, so I really like this just because it talked about all of those themes that I think are really important in any job. Next, I have Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is another one I would be surprised if you haven't heard of. I gave this book 4 stars. It's written in interview style of a band in the 70s, and it's about love and addiction and what it was like to be in music at that time. And I really, really like this book. I also watched a TV show right after I read this book, which I probably wouldn't recommend because like I could tell every little difference whenever I was watching the TV show. But I honestly really liked the show. It was really cool to hear the music. I'm like kind of obsessed with the album right now. And it's just cool to know that like that came like from the story. And that was like an actual music that I can listen to. So I really did like this book. I like Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing a lot. I still think I like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo more, but I like that this was, like I said, in like interview form. I just thought it was really a nice breather when it came to reading it because it was just like something different. The next book I have is Persuasion by Jane Austen. I took a Jane Austen class actually this year at school. It was a super chill class. It was literally like a book club. We read like a chapter of this a week and it's already like a tiny book, but it was really good. I love Jane Austen. It's a very slow burn romance. Like I don't think you could get any slower than this, and I gave this 4 stars for that reason. Probably would be more if it wasn't so slow, but I was like, can we pick up the pace just a teensy bit? But it was very good if you like the classics. Next, I read Serenade by Tony Bentley, and I gave this 4 stars. And I've already talked about this one a lot too, but this one just meant a lot to me personally with the ballet aspect. It just really felt nostalgic almost, which is weird to say about a book that you've never read before, but that was just a vibe that it gave me, and I learned a lot too. I reread The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, and I gave this 3 stars. Again, it wasn't my favorite ever. I liked it more the second time, I think, than I did the first time, but it still wasn't my favorite in the series. After that, I read The Mistake by Elle Kennedy, and I gave this 3 stars as well. It is the sequel to The Deal by Elle Kennedy, which I read earlier in the year, and I did really like this book still. It was another easy read. I liked The Deal more than this one, but it was still cute and romantic. And again, I like Elle Kennedy's writings because it feels a lot deeper. It doesn't just feel like surface level, like she always has a few other themes in there to develop about just like life in general, and they feel a little bit more realistic than some other romances that I've read. So I really liked this book. It was another hockey college romance. Then I read the other 2 books in the Cruel Prince trilogy, or the Folk of the Air trilogy. So I read The Wicked King and I read The Queen of Nothing. I gave both of these 4 stars, but I definitely liked the last one more. The second one does end on a pretty good cliffhanger though, but I had the next book like ready and waiting, so in my head these books do kind of blend into one. I can't remember exactly what happens in which. I just know that I like the second one, like the last one the most. The last book that I'm going to include in this video, number 16, is Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. And I finished this morning, so The Wound is like very new, but I actually really did not like this book. I think I'm gonna give it like 2 stars. Like there were times when I enjoyed reading it. I did finish it, which is means I have to have kind of liked it. The couple in this book just annoyed me so much, and I think this is a little bit of an unpopular opinion. I know so many people love this book, love this series. I don't think I can read the rest of this series. They just annoyed me far too much. I didn't feel like any of the characters were that deep. And I also feel like the world that they lived in wasn't super developed. Like I was a bit just like, oh, they're all rich. Like they were like trying to like hint at like there being more stuff going on, and I was just like, I don't know. So maybe that's something that's developed more in the rest of the series. But the relationship in here is just very, very toxic and just really got on my nerves. And I just felt like the book was really repetitive. So it just wasn't for me. It might be for you. Give it a try if you want to find out for yourself. It just was not was not for me. So that is everything that I have read this year and all of my thoughts on all the books that I've read this year so far. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a like or comment below what book you're really excited about reading in the next year, or if you want to talk books to me at any point, I would love that. And yeah, I will see you in my next video. Bye!